Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 24. Zevachim, Daf Kavdalad. Amid Aleph on the top. And any two verses that come as one do not teach their common aspect to similar cases. Therefore, one cannot assume that analogous prohibitions carry penalty of death at the hand of heaven as well. And even according to the one who says that they do teach their common aspect, the prohibition against service by those who drank wine also contains explicit mention of death at the hand of heaven and constitutes a third verse. And all agree that three verses that come as one do not teach their common aspect. Omed al gabe kelim, al gabe bema, al gabe ragli chavecho basul minalan, tetana deve Rav Yishmael, oil v'ritzpa, mikadeshet b'kulei sharet mikadashim, מה כלי שורש לא יהיה דבר חוצץ בינו לבין כלי שורש אף רצפה לא יהיה דבר חוצץ בינו לבין הרצפה. The Mishnah teaches that one who is standing upon vessels or upon an animal or upon the feet of another is unfit to perform avoda, to perform rites. The Gemara elaborates, from where do we derive this? This is derived as the sage from the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught, since the floor of the temple courtyard sanctifies the priest to perform the service, and service vessels, meaning priestly vestments, also sanctify him, one may draw a comparison between the two. Just as with regard to service vessels, nothing may interpose between the priest and the service vessel. So too with regard to the floor, nothing may interpose between the priest and the floor. The Gemara adds, and each of these three cases mentioned in the Mishnah is necessary, as had the Mishnah taught us only, that a vessel interposes between the priest's feet and the floor. One might have thought that this is only because it is not a type of flesh. But with regard to an animal, which is a type of flesh, I will say that it does not constitute an interposition, and had it taught us only that an animal interposes, one might have thought that this is only because it is not of the human species. But another person who is human, I will say that he does not interpose, therefore each is necessary. Tanya, we learned in the Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rag lo achas al kli v'rag lo achas al ritzpo, Rag lo achas al האבן ורag lo achas al ritzpo ro'in. כל שאילו ינטל הכלי ותינטל האבן, יכול לעמוד על רגלו אחס ויעבוד עבודתו כשרה, ואם לאו עבודתו פסולה. It is taught in Brayso that Rabbi Eliezer says if one of the priest's feet was on a vessel and one of his feet was on the floor, or if one of his feet was on a stone and one of his feet was on the floor, one sees any case where the vessel to be removed or the stone removed, he would still be able to stand on one foot and perform rites, the service is valid. But if he would not be able to stand on one foot, his service is disqualified. Boya Rabbi Ami Nidel Dela Ha'eben Omad Le'amau Echadin Dato Lecha Bera Lo Tibayela דוודאי חציה כי תיבא אלך דדעתו לך במאי כיוון דדעתו לך ברכה מאוד ובך דמאיו אוי דילמה השתמיה Hotalisha. Rabbi Ami raises a dilemma. If one of the stone tiles of the temple floor came loose and began to wobble, and the priest stood on it, what is the halacha? The Gemara elaborates, do not raise the dilemma with regard to a case where he does not intend to attach the stone to the floor again, as it certainly interposes in such a case, since it is considered an item separate from the temple. Rather, when you raise this dilemma, do so with regard to a case where he intends to attach it again. In such a case, what is the halacha? Does one say that since he intends to attach it, it is considered like that which is already attached, or perhaps now at least it is disconnected and it is considered a separate item? Rabbi Zuti raises this dilemma like this. Rabbi Ami raises a dilemma. Well, this is Rabbi Zuti's version of Rabbi Ami's dilemma. If one of the stone tiles was uprooted and the priest stood in this empty space, what's the halacha? Maya kamli ki kadesh David ritzpa elyona kadesh odilma ad le'aris tehoma kadesh. The Gemara interjects, what is the dilemma he is raising? Perhaps this is the dilemma. When King David sanctified the site of the temple, did he sanctify the upper level of the floor but nothing underneath it? Or perhaps he sanctified it to the depths of the earth? But if this is the dilemma, if this is the dilemma, let him raise the dilemma with regard to the entire temple courtyard, meaning, what is the halacha if the entire floor is removed? Li'olam, 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 li'olam. Lo l'mshit le de'ad aristo magadish. De'achom boele, de'ach she'eros bekach oidin, de'ach she'eros bekach teiku. Gemara responds, actually, it is obvious to him that King David sanctified the site of the temple to the depths of the earth. And this is the dilemma that he raised. When a priest stands on an unfinished part of the temple floor, is this a normal manner of ministration, or is this not a normal manner of ministration? Concerning the dilemma itself, the Gemara responds, Teku, the Gemara shall stand unresolved. I'm not sure what teku this is. It's like 200 and maybe it's 215, 16, 17, around there. But anyway, Kibel Bismoy Pasul Rabbi Shimon Machshir Tanu Abana Rabbi Shimon Machshir Tanu Abana Besboy V'lo Kamlamashir Lo Tehe Kabbalah Yamin Besboy V'nosam Malamat Shelo Tehe Nesin Ela B'Yamin. The Mishnah teaches, if the priest collected the blood with his left hand, the service is disqualified and Rabbi Shimon deems it fit. The sages taught, the verse states, and the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it upon the corners of the altar. Leviticus 4:25. The conjunction of the term with his finger and the term and the priest shall take teaches that the collection of the blood may be performed only with the right hand, since the word finger in the context of priesthood is always referring to the right hand. Likewise, the phrase with his finger and puts it teaches that the placing of the blood may be performed only with the right hand. Amar Shimon v'chinem rayad b'kabbalah ela b'esboy v'nosan shelo tehei istina ela b'yamin ho'il b'lo ne'emra yad b'kabbalah kibel v'sbol kasha. Rabbi Shimon said, but is the word hand stated with regard to the collection of the blood? Rather, the verse states only with his finger and put it, teaching that the placing of the blood may be performed only with the right hand, since the word hand is not stated with regard to the collection of the blood. Even if one collected the blood with his left hand, the offering is fit. Rabbi Shimon mimalav shachi yislek zerashava ki lo nemraya mekabal amay havi yislek zerashava ki nemraya mekabal amay havi. The Gemara asks, but as for Rabbi Shimon, whichever way you look at it, his opinion is difficult. If he holds that one derives a verbal analogy from the passage discussing a leper, Leviticus chapter 14, which indicates that all references to hands and fingers mean specifically the right hand, then even if the word hand is not stated with regard to the collection of the blood, what of it? In any event, the word finger is stated, and if he does not hold that one derives this verbal analogy, then even if the word hand were stated with regard to the collection of blood, what of it? The word would have no significance. Amar Rav Yehuda lo ilam lesdek zera shava v'hachikama chi nemar yad yamin bekabala hoy v'lo nemar yad yamin bekabala ki v'lo smol kasher. Rabbi Yehuda says actually he does not hold that one derives this verbal analogy, and this is what Rabbi Shimon is saying. But is the phrase right hand stated with regard to the collection of the blood? Rather, since the phrase right hand is not stated with regard to the collection of the blood, even if one collected the blood with his left hand, the offering is fit. Amar le Rabba ihak yafilu nitina nami v'od v'chilet le Rabbi Shimon gzera shava v'tanya Rabbi Shimon omer kol makom shene'emar yad eno el yamin etzba eno el yamin. Rabba said to him, if so, then even the rite of placing the blood should be valid when performed with the left hand, since the phrase right hand does not appear with regard to it as well. And furthermore, does Rabbi Shimon really not hold that one derives this verbal analogy, but isn't it taught in a Braita that Rabbi Shimon says, in every instance in the Torah that the word hand is stated, the verse is referring only to the right hand, and whenever the verse mentions finger, it is referring only to a finger of the right hand. Rather, Rava says, actually, Rabbi Shimon holds that one derives this verbal analogy, and this is what he is saying. But is the word hand stated with regard to the collection of the blood? Since the word hand is not stated with regard to the collection of the blood, but the word finger is stated, and collection cannot be performed with a finger alone, one must conclude that the word finger must actually be referring to the placing of the blood. Therefore, while the placing of the blood must be performed with the right hand, if one collected the blood with his left hand, the offering is fit. Amar le Rav Sama bare de Rav Ashi le Ravina אי אפשר יביא לאוזן לשפת מזרח וגם לבא. Rav Sama, the son of Rav Ashi, said to Ravina, but is it possible to fashion a small handle for the rim? Is it possible to fashion a small handle for the rim of the bowl, and one could then hold the bowl with his finger and collect the blood with it? If so, it is possible for one to collect the blood with only his finger. Amar Abaya, rather, Abaya says, and now we turn to 24b. Are we going to do a separate daf or just go all the way through? See how much time we have here? Yeah, let's go all the way through, why not? Top of 24b, the word b'mikra nidrash lefanav uli acharav kamiflegi. They disagree with regard to whether a verse is interpreted based on juxtaposition to the language preceding it and to the language following it. According to Rabbi Shimon, A verse is interpreted only based on the language following it. Therefore, when the verse states, "And the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it upon the corners of the altar," the word finger is referring only to the placing of the blood and not its collection. The rabbis hold that the verse is also interpreted based on the language preceding it. Accordingly, they require that both rites be performed with the right hand. Okay. Amar Abaye, ho de Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, mafka d'avur, ubapka mi de Rabbanan, itan Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer. כל מקום שנאמר אצבע בקבלה, שינה בקבלה, פסול. בנתינה כשר. כל מקום שנאמר אצבע בנתינה, שינה בנתינה, פסול. בקבלה כשר. Abaye says, this statement of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, diverges from the opinion of his father, and it diverges from the opinion of the rabbis. As it is taught in Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, says, in every instance in the Torah that the word finger is stated, with regard to the collection of the blood, and not with regard to placing the blood on the altar, if the priest deviated from the proper method of collection and performed it with the left hand, the offering is disqualified. But if he deviated from the proper method of placing the blood, the offering remains fit. And in every instance that the word finger is stated, only with regard to placing of the blood, if the priest deviated from the proper method of placing, the offering is disqualified. But if he deviated from the proper method of collection, the offering remains fit. Okay? המזבח באצבעך, ובסוד נדרש, לפניו ולא לפני פניו ולאחריו. And where is the word finger stated? Only with regard to placing. As is written, and you shall take of the blood of the bullock and place it upon the corners of the altar with your finger. Exodus 29:12. And he holds that a verse is interpreted based on its position to the language immediately preceding it, and not to the language before that which immediately precedes it, nor to the language following it. Amar Rabba bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan, kol makom shenemar etzba huna eina el yamin. Rabba bar Chana says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, in every instance in the Torah, that it is stated that an action is performed with a finger, and by members of the priesthood, it may be performed only with the right hand. Kasal gedaitin tarti beinan kichti v'lagol dan chatat be'etzba'o v'yelef b'mitzvah kichti v'tava l'kohen et etzba'o hayamanit ve'arei k'mitzah d'lo k'tib be'elai k'una utnan kamat b'smal basul. For comments, it might enter our mind to say that this means that we require both the finger and the priesthood to be stated together in the verse in order to mandate use of the right hand. For example, as is written, and the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, Leviticus 4:25. And the fact that this verse is referring to a finger from his right hand is derived from a leper, as is written, and the priest shall dip his right finger, Leviticus 14:16. This cannot be correct, as there is the verse that addresses the removal of a handful from a meal offering in which only the priesthood is written, and yet we learn in a mission in Menachot 6a, if one removed the handful with his left hand, the meal offering is disqualified. Rather, the Rava says, this statement means that if the verse mentions either a finger or the priesthood, only the right hand may be used. Okay. Amar Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye, Amar Le'Abaye. הרי הולכס איבום לקבש תכסיב בהו כהונה תכסיב הקריב הכהנה את הכל לקטיר המזבח ואמר זו הולכס איברים לקבש ותנן הרגל שימין ושמאלו ובתורה לחוץ. Abai said to Rava, but this is contradicted by the verse discussing the conveyance of the limbs of the daily burnt offering to the ramp of the altar as priesthood is written with regard to it, as it is written, and the priest shall sacrifice the whole and make it smoke upon the altar. Leviticus 1:13. And the master said that this verse is referring to the conveyance of the limbs to the ram, and yet we learned in the Mishnah in Tamid 31b, when the priest conveys the limbs to the ram, the foot of the right side of the offering is carried in the left, and the hand of the priest, and the place of its skin, meaning the side of the limb covered in skin, is held facing outward. Clearly, use of the left hand does not disqualify the conveyance of limbs. Ki amrinan, etzva kuna b'davar ameakev kapara dumya b'dimitzah. The Gemara responds, when we say that if the verse states either finger or priesthood, then the left hand is disqualified, this is only with regard to a matter that precedes atonement, meaning a rite whose performance is indispensable to the atonement. Similar to the sprinkling of the oil on the leper, see Leviticus 14:16. The conveyance of the limbs, by contrast, is not indispensable to atonement. דכתיב בהו כהונה דכתיב בהו כהונה מדבר לרהו ותרן קיבל לשמאלו Rather, Rava says, let's go back to Elam Rava. Elam Rava, o etzva o kahuna. Right. Okay. Elam Rava, o etzva o kahuna. Rather, Rava says, this statement means that if the verse mentions either a finger or a priesthood, only the right hand may be used. Abai says, but this is contradicted by the verse discussing the conveyance of the limbs of the daily burnt offering to the ramp of the altar, as priesthood is written with regard to it, as it is written, and the priest shall sacrifice the whole and make it smoke upon the altar. Leviticus 1:13. And the master said that this verse is referring to the conveyance of the limbs to the ram, and yet we learned in the Mishnah in Tamid 31b, when the priest conveys the limbs to the ram, the foot of the right side of the offering is carried in the left hand of the priest, and in the place of its skin, meaning the side of the limb covered in skin, is held facing outward. Clearly, use of the left hand does not disqualify the conveyance of the limbs. The Gemara responds, when do we say that if the verse states either finger or priesthood, then the left hand is disqualified? This is only with regard to a matter that precludes atonement, meaning a rite whose performance is indispensable to the atonement, similar to the sprinkling of the oil on the leper. See Leviticus 14:16. The conveyance of the limbs, by contrast, is not indispensable to atonement. נכתב בהו כהונה ודבר המעכב וגבהו תנן כאילו לשמאלו פסול רבי שמעון מכשיר. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the collection of the blood in a service vessel about which the priesthood is written and which is a matter that precludes atonement? And yet we learn in the Mishnah when If one collected the blood with his left hand and the blood is disqualified for the offering, Rabbi Shimon deems it fit. Rabbi Shimon tarti ba'i. The Gemara responds, Rabbi Shimon requires that both matters appear in the verse, meaning both finger and priesthood. Mi ba'i Rabbi Shimon tarti ve'tanya. Rabbi Shimon omer, kol Rabbi Shimon yad eno el yamin, etzba eno el yamin. The Gemara asks, does Rabbi Shimon really require both? But isn't it taught in Braita that Rabbi Shimon says in every instance in the Torah that the word hand is stated, the verse is referring only to the right hand, and whenever the verse mentions finger, is referring to a finger on the right hand. Etzba lo bai kahuna, kahuna bai etzba. The Gemara responds, according to Rabbi Shimon, if the verse mentions only finger, then it does not require a mention of the priesthood as well for the limitation to apply. But if the verse mentions only the priesthood, it does require mention of finger for the limitation to apply. Ve'ela kohen amali bechihunan, or brackets bechihuno. The Gemara asks, but according to Rabbi Shimon, if the mention of the priesthood alone does not suffice to disqualify the right hand, then why do I need this reference to a priest with regard to the condition of the blood? After all, the verse already states that the collection must be performed by the sons of Aaron. The Gemara responds, the additional mention of the priesthood indicates that the priests must perform the collection of the blood in their priestly state while wearing the priestly vestments. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the sprinkle of the blood concerning which only the priesthood is written in the verse? And we learned if one sprinkled the blood with his left hand, it is disqualified. Rabbi Shimon does not disagree with this ruling, indicating that Rabbi Shimon holds that a mention of the priesthood does not require a mention of finger. Amar Abaye, plig bebraita d'tanya kibel bismol pasul, Rabbi Shimon machshir zrak bismol pasul, Rabbi Shimon machshir. Abaye says he disagrees with this ruling in the Braita, as it is written in the Braita, if one collected the blood with his left hand, it is disqualified, and Rabbi Shimon deems it fit. Additionally, if one sprinkled the blood with his left hand, it is disqualified, and Rabbi Shimon deems it fit. El al-hadam yad lekimitza, regel lechalitza, ozen l'retzia, lamali, midrava bar barchana nafka. The Gemara asks, but that which Rava says with regard to the superfluous phrases in the passage discussing a leper, one derives a verbal analogy between hand and hand, the word hand and the word hand mentioned with regard to the removal of a handful from a meal offering, to indicate that the latter must also be performed with the right hand. Additionally, one derives a verbal analogy between foot and foot mentioned with regard to the chalitza ritual, and one derives a verbal analogy between ear and ear mentioned with regard to the piercing of a Hebrew slave's ear with an awl. One may ask, why do I need the first analogy? The requirement that the handful be removed with the right hand can be derived from the statement of Rabbi Bar Barchana above, since priesthood, as mentioned in the verse describing it. The one responds, both derivations are necessary, one for the removal of the handful from a meal offering, and one for the sanctification of the handful, meaning placing it into a sacred service, to a second service vessel. Both must be performed with the right hand.